Hello, friends. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here. You're with us. We're going to have a little conversation today about worship. And I'm just going to brag about David just for a minute. Somebody, I was just telling him this story. Somebody was in the congregation. They were standing next to David, and they heard him singing, and they were like, wow, David sings pretty good. And I was like, yeah, David was a worship leader. And they were like, what? They have like no idea, and I know you're going to downplay it real quick. You're probably going to deflect it immediately. But worship is something that it's important to you, and it's played a big role in your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I joked on Sunday, but worship, like playing guitar and singing, was a learned habit. It was something after high school that I thought was cool, and I, had done a lot of sports, but I thought it'd be fun to play guitar. And this guy that was kind of mentoring me, he played guitar, so I learned how to play some Smashing Pumpkins.
There you go.
Free Fallin'.
Yeah, there you go. Work on that D sus.
Yeah, did some of that,
Mm-hmm.
and yet when I started getting into youth ministry, like working with kids, working with high schoolers, it was just something you just kind of had to do. Otherwise, you were stuck in a lot of time. You're at the beach. You have all these kids around you, and it's like, this is a moment right here.
Yeah.
And if you can't play guitar and sing, then you kind of
I Could Sing of Your Love Forever.
It was kind of a learned skill, but it really became a big part of my relationship with the Lord. In fact, for this fasting, these 21 days of fasting on Wednesdays from food, but one of the things I inserted into these 21 days is to get playing guitar again for an hour a day.
Yes.
And really just kind of doing that personal worship with the Lord, and it's been really meaningful. And it's a place that I go to whenever it's heavy in my life. I'll pick up the guitar and go to my secret place. In Oregon when I was up there for high school and college, that's where I started doing ministry, and that's basically what I did more than anything was lead the music times.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun.
I love that. And I think it's important. I think there's a lot of pastors that don't really understand that side. And I feel like that's something that I appreciate as somebody overseeing that area. I'm like, David knows, he knows what it takes, in that area. And even your story in Belize, it's like, you don't know where to start in planning a church. You start leading worship,
Friday Night Fire. Yeah, my wife too. What people really don't know is Brittany.
Yes, brag on Brittany.
Probably one of the most beautiful singing voices I've ever heard. Like, it is.
I agree
awesome.
with you.
It is awesome.
I've heard her one time. It's like seeing a unicorn or something. You're like, I saw it the one time
in the desert.
And
then she's actually gotten really good playing piano too, and so she does worship, and she also likes Led Zeppelin and sings a whole bunch of other songs too. A little Elton John in there.
That's awesome.
But yeah, she does a lot. But in Belize, we knew the Lord was wanting us to do something, and we were trying to be patient. And after connecting with some people down there, it seemed like a worship night was really going to be the most meaningful thing that we could have done. And so we did. We started Friday Night Fire, and had 100 people at one point coming through singing "For the Sake of Belize, Burn Like a Fire in Me." And that was pretty special. Well, Brittany's on the keys, and Brittany just does not like people paying attention to her at all. So that's why but that was a real sacrifice that she made to the Lord for their behalf, to be able to get up there and sing. It was so funny because when I would sing, people would sing with us. When she would sing, everyone would listen. It was made her a little uncomfortable.
Which is like the opposite of what you want.
She's like, why aren't they singing? And I was like, Brittany, because you sound so awesome. They're just like drinking it in. They're being like sung over. Yeah. When I sing, they're like, let's drown that out a little bit more. But those are meaningful times for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And I just feel like it's such a good primer for us as we're talking about worship. Like, all of us have had experience doing that. We know kind of what that's like. In church, though, sometimes we can make it complicated or weird, or we could add all sorts of things. What for you is worship? What if you're going to boil down worship into its most essential place? What would you communicate?
Yeah. There's two ways to go about it, right? There's what is it not? Helps clarify what it is.
That's good.
And then what it is.
I like
can be helpful
things.
Too. And I think even, it's so easy in our Christian vernacular, and I think we even just probably did it, but to equate worship with playing guitar, singing, and leading people in song. where worship is, supersedes that, 100%. Although I think music, instrumentation, and song and lyric, all of those things can be so helpful, are probably one of the most helpful ways we can worship. They're totally mutually exclusive. Like worship stands all by itself over here.
Yeah.
And whether there's song or whether there's not, worship's still alive and well. It doesn't need any of those things.
Yeah.
But those things can serve to that purpose. And so I think there's a little bit of kind of trying to real craft that out. So then what is worship? What is this concept of our relationship with God? But we're actually people who have no worth, are showering God, who has unlimited worth.
Yeah.
We're showering him with worth. I mean, it really is a completely ridiculous thing. And I used to, when I was talking with the kids about it, when I was, trying to teach people guitar and teach people about worship at the same time, I used to talk to them about this like cup of worth. So it's like when God created Adam and Eve, when he created humanity, he gave each person a cup of worth. And it's like to you, I mean, you have a lot of worth in my life because of our relationship. Yeah. But if I don't know you at all, like, you don't have much worth to me, right? Like we're not in connection. But for some reason, as God looks down on us, he sees us with all this worth. And so that's an amazing thing right there. I mean, you can only understand it, love of a child, all of that type of stuff. But God sees us as valuable and having worth. Yeah. And then he so longs for us to give that worth to him. Yeah. And that's kind of the way that creation was made, is God showered us with his own image, which made us have worth. And then we respond by loving him above everything else, and we're giving that worth back to him. And it's this beautiful, cycle of oneness, like Jesus prayed in John 17. And so we're telling these kids, it's like, so what are you going to do with your cup of worth? So any moment, whether you're in church, whether you're out, looking at the sunset, whether you're, picking up dog poops, whatever it is, in those moments, you carry this worth that God's very interested in, and you can give that worth to him any way, shape, or form, and he receives it. But you can also give that worth to other things, and that's where the Bible just chafes so much against this idea that we who are created would worship created things. That we would take our cup of worth, and instead of giving it to our Maker, where it's deserved, we would shortchange that, and we would give it to some created thing, whether that's your brand new Ford Mustang, or whether that's your bank account, whether that's a girl or a guy, or whatever it might be, whether that's yourself, but anywhere that you pour that out, that worth out, it's completely worthless. Yeah. But every time we pour out our worth on the Lord, it's almost like that worth is showered back onto us. So, anyways, those are just some ways that I've talked about it. But ultimately, to me, worship just comes down to enjoying God. I think that really is the key definition of what worship is. It's enjoying God, enjoying your Maker and what he's given you. And that comes from Exodus 34. I'm not just making it up. And also the Westminster Catechism. They talk about the chief end of man being to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And so I would say worship to me has kind of boiled down to that, to glory in God and to enjoy God, all kind of wrapped it up. And Exodus 33 and 34 is where you have the story of Moses on Mount Sinai. And he's there in the presence of God. He's been there for 40 days up in the cloud of fire that all the other people were too scared to come up into. Yeah. And there he's totally satisfied in God's presence. And he actually says to God, hey, I know I saw you as a burning bush. I see you now as this burning mountain. I got to see your power. I got to hear you tell me your name, I am. But he's like, but I've never seen you. And so he says, can I see you? Show me your glory, your kabod, the weight, the substance of who you are. And God's response, coming into Exodus 34 now, is he says, yes, I will show you my goodness. So the glory of God is his goodness.
Yeah.
In that is equated there. The kabod, the substance of God.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually get to see it, all it is goodness. That God is good. He is so good. So when we say God is good, it's almost like this like rah type thing.
Yeah.
But we're saying something that is so deeply theological that all goodness emanates from the source of goodness. Kind of like the sun has light and the moon reflects it. So every ounce of goodness you've ever experienced in your life is a reflection of the goodness, of the substance, of the kabod, of the weight of who God is.
Yeah.
And so that's what it says. God said, I will show you my glory. I'll let my goodness pass before you. And then his goodness is described as, abounding in love and mercy and faithfulness to thousands, forgiving iniquity and sin, slow to anger, and then also punishing the wicked. And so this is the goodness of God revealed in a fuller character.
Yeah.
But that connection between God's glory and his goodness, really what that means is what God wants more than anything is for us to enjoy his goodness. And so when we enjoy the goodness of God, wherever, however that has shown up in our life, he glories in that. He revels in that. He's like, they noticed. They saw it. They felt it. They knew it.
Yeah.
I was there and they were aware. They acknowledged me. They're acknowledging me as the source of all that goodness. And that, for whatever reason, the Bible teaches us, that is the thing that makes God the most excited. When we enjoy his goodness. Now, that's awesome, right? Because what if God decided the thing that made him the most excited was whenever we got hurt? That would be a bum deal. But the way that the scriptures teach about this Father that we have and his Father heart and how good he is, it's not kind of some surfacey, like everything's happy. But when we acknowledge him by enjoying his goodness, it lights him up like nothing else. It really is. The word worship, proskuneuos in the Greek or whatever, to turn and kiss. It's like a kiss on his cheek every time we say thank you.
Or like a dog licking his master's hand is proskuneo, that other. It is. It's like this, this adoration to God. It's beautiful. When I think there's like an audacity to worship too, just a little bit. And we've talked a lot about the tabernacle, what that looks like, enter his courts with, or the gates of thanksgiving, his courts with praise. There's this process, we see in the Old Testament. And a few months back, I was preaching a sermon and I was thinking about that phrase when Jesus said, if you go to make your sacrifice and there at the altar realize you have something wrong with your brother, leave it there and go work it out. But the audacity of there is that part where we have no standing on our own to be with God.
Right.
And you see the tabernacle set up as this, this is intense. You're showing up at the inner gates. There's flesh burning. There's
got to do everything perfect. And you get into the Holy of Holies and you're like, there's one family, one time a year that has any right to go in there. They don't have any right anyway. And it's so scary that they tie, the rope around their ankle and then they go into this, through the veil that's 30 feet tall and 3 inches thick, this insane carpet that's hung. And I love the imagery of one of the only effect on the tabernacle from Jesus' death was that veil being torn. And this audacity of, we can go in there now. This is crazy. And I think that's the danger of us conflating just music and worship as if it's worship is reserved for this really happy time or this time I feel really good. There's sacrifice involved in worship. There's this miracle involved in worship. In all of that, let me take a step back. What is positive about music worship? Because it is something that we do on Sunday morning. It is something that we value. What is it for you that you feel like in a congregational level when we're singing songs, what's the positive side of that? Yeah, well, that's the power of music and lyric and sound and even silence, all of those things are so moving to our spirits. They're so engaging. They heighten our sensations. They draw us into certain places. And if the motivation and the destination of all of that is enjoying God in truth, spirit and in truth, I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful. I mean, obviously I've experienced it,
Yeah.
But I do think there is just constant, need to pause and to just make sure the motivation is correct, and then the destination is the truth about God. And I think obviously that has been misused. I mean, the power has been misused. The power of song and lyric and even the silence and all of that has been misused and can be misused at any given time. But it also can be used, in a way that is good and right. And so that's why, I mean, I do think, I picture our Sunday morning services with, sometimes you've got all the sound and the volume, and you've got all these people that are so good at crafting the music, and then you've even got some like these lights and sometimes the fog and all these things and it's just, and even the stained glass and the structure and the space, and then you have people all around you that are like, without even trying to, they're like encouraging you, and it's just it's this environment that I mean, it really easy could be totally empty and totally emotional, or it could be genuine and real. And what's crazy is in any given Sunday morning, you might have both. You might have people who are truly meeting with the truth of who God is and enjoying Him in that, that spirit of holiness, while the person next to him is just kind of like, caught up in the emotion of it all. And that's a little tricky. And so does that mean we shut it all down? No, I think we just keep teaching on it. We keep exemplifying it. The people who say that, we shouldn't do those things, I can understand where they're coming from for sure. But I also, when I read the scriptures and I think about what David, how extravagant he was in what he wanted to do for the Lord, and even the way that the temple was built, by Solomon. Like David got all the stuff together out of his heart to just love the Lord and not want God to live in a tent. He wanted him to be in a tent. And God was like, I'm cool with the tent, man. It's all right. But then Solomon built that tent, and just the extravagance, the intricacies. When God set up the building of the tabernacle and He gave Moses the blueprints, it was ornate. It was beautiful. He even put His spirit on a guy to be a craftsman, to work with stone, and it's like it was like he was empowered for that work because God wanted it to be so beautiful, and the transcendence of all of that, especially for a people like Israel. I think of the churches that have been built, and the beauty and the stained glass and the height and like all of those things can be so right and so good. And yes, they can be tweaked. But I understand why people would do that. But I think if David walked into one of our worship services, he would be like, what? He'd be like, this is awesome.
We'd have to watch him, though. He might disrobe or something in the middle.
I think Paul, because Paul, I would imagine, would be someone who would just be like really always just trying to make sure it's right and true. And so if he could see like where it could go wrong, he could see him. But even then, I think he would come in and just kind of be like, wow. This is uplifting. This is wonderful. And hopefully, Jesus would walk in and he'd really get, that everything was directed His way. That's the hope. But it takes constant paying attention to that.
Totally. And I feel like you can't say the tool is evil. Like, you just got to say whatever the motivation behind it is the thing that we look at. And
the people are usually the problem.
The people are usually the problem, And I think about it, and our team we use lights and we use video and we craft moments. And I look at the Psalms and you just see such honesty that David's bringing to the table. And a lot less rules than maybe we would like to see. It's like sometimes it's directed at God. Sometimes it's directed at people. Sometimes it's directed at Himself. There's like this sort of artistry that's at play and this real heartfelt nature to it. And I remember there was a guy that was on tour with us named Tony who was so good at lighting direction, just so good at it. He did it for Oprah. He did it for all these like huge people. And he was a lighting director when I think he was like 14 for Delirious. So he went out with Delirious. That's like where he cut his teeth. And this guy just eat, breathe, sleep, lighting. That's all he cared about. That's all he thought about. He was really good at it. And I remember there was a moment, where, and obviously we have all these conversations with people in the congregation. There's always lots of people going, why do we need that? Do we need that? And no, we don't need any of it, But I started to think, I think about Nick or some of these people on our staff, I'm like, to say that they have no place in the kingdom because they have different giftings maybe than preaching or something, I'm like, no, I love that. I love everybody doing their best work, coming to the table. And Bezalel, I love this. Like, there's some things in the tabernacle that's like, make it exactly like this.
Exactly.
There's other areas where it's like, use your artistry to create this over here, and it's okay. You could kind of make it however you feel. And I do think that that's something that we're always in for Living Streams. It's like, how can we walk that line? Well, ultimately, if we're making a real big deal of God, we're being extravagant, but we're always watching our heart and our motivation, and we're quick to shut it down. I mean, Nick will be the first to say, hey, if we need to shut all this stuff down, that's okay, you know. But there's a place, I think, for artistry in the church, you know.
Yeah, I mean, art. You know, I mean, that's the broader term is artistry, and it's everyone making an offering, you know. And you know, not many of us can sing super well into a microphone. And you know, me included, I've never felt like I was strong in that category. But I can't offer, you know, whatever I have. And so for me, preaching is kind of that's my worship at this point. And trust me, preaching can get just as twisted and self-centered as anything else, and probably, you know, has been more often than anything else. Just trying to create emotions with the words that you say, or, you know, trying to self-inflate or something. Like, I mean, there's a real need to check all of that, because that's worship as well. And so people, you know, I mean, doing the lighting, all of that, the drummer back there, that's his offering. And, you know, the people who are, you know, making sure everybody's safe on a Sunday morning, that's their offering. And, you know, there's all these different ways, ways we can minister to the Lord's heart and enjoy Him and say thank you. I remember early on when I was first started walking with the Lord, maybe I was a year in to really seriously following Jesus, about 19 years old or something, and I had bought a necklace for a girl that I liked, and I remember I was actually, it was in Oregon, and I was standing next to this river, and the necklace was in my pocket. I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I mean, I like rivers, and I was just chilling for a moment, and I just felt like something kind of stir in my heart. And I had this idea. I was like, you know, what if instead of giving this to this girl, I gave this to the Lord? Like, is that possible? Can you do that? And again, I'm 19 years old. I don't know all the rules of worship. And yet I just felt compelled in that moment. I was like, God, I want you to know that you are above anything else I could desire. And so I took that necklace and I just threw it in the river, you know, and awesome. That just was this time of me just in that moment going, I'm so thankful for you. I want to try and figure something out that would make your heart rejoice, you know? And it's hard for me because part of me is like, well, no good thing. Like God was probably like, you know, kind of put that, you know, desire on my heart and then kind of let me play it out or something. I don't know how all that stuff works, right? Predestined and all those things. But that was just something where, you know, nobody else was ever going to, I mean, I guess people know now, but it was just a moment where I wanted to make it clear that, you know, He was my greatest ultimate desire. Even though I was having other desires, you know, in life, and I don't think it's wrong for us to enjoy other parts of creation, but I think, you know, when those other enjoyments become more than our enjoyment in Him, that's idolatry, which is the opposite of worship, and we are very, very prone for that.
And I think worship helps us set the course back, right, on our heart, you know. And I love what you're saying, because I think this is something that maybe we miss on the opposite side, where it's like, okay, great, we love the artistry, we love creating moments. And those of us in church, we always have to check ourselves, because we're like, we're getting really good at that. Maybe there's times where we need to strip it away, you know, but worship always requires some sort of sacrifice. And for you, Chuck, in that, you know, it was a sacrifice of like, hey, this is something that actually hurts a little bit, and I'm going to just plow through that hurt and sacrifice. And I do think there are times where people show up on a Sunday morning and they sing songs and they don't feel it. I mean, there's been many times for me where I'm like, I actually don't want to sing this song. I know it's true, but I'm just going to sing it anyway. And that sacrifice of praise is a big part of worship. You know, that's a big part of it. And subtracting maybe just all the good feelings all the time. And we've been talking about this a little bit lately, especially that song, that Cody Carnes song that we were singing.
Right.
Jesus, you don't owe me anything.
Yeah. I'm not here for blessings.
I'm not here for blessings. Like, and I think it's so hard and in current worship culture where you're like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to worship and I'm going to get physically healed. I'm going to get emotionally healed. I'm going to get all the great stuff, like
get the feels,
get all the feels going. And not that stuff doesn't happen in worship. It does, but that's not the goal of worship, right. And that sacrifice is so key.
Yeah. It's actually prayer. I heard someone define prayer as relaxing into God's goodness. And,
there's like the stages of prayer, right?
Yeah,
that was really good.
I thought it was just so interesting as a simplification. Obviously, prayer is broad, but prayer. We've tried to really emphasize as a church that listening is a huge part of prayer. Like, when we say prayer, our minds think, tell God what you want,
asking,
and it's like, though that's an aspect of prayer under supplication. If you're in a conversation with God, you should really let Him do most of the talking, because His words are life. And so then prayer as a thing that you've prayed, you've really had a time of prayer. When at the end of it, you're able to relax into God's goodness. And whether or not you got what you needed or whether you feel anything, it's like, you see that in the Psalms where most of the Psalms are lament. It's David saying, where are you? Why are my enemies? Lord, I'm surrounded. Lord, I don't understand. So there's all this lament, but usually, it'll finalize with something, not always, but sometimes with, yet Lord, I trust you, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He will strengthen your heart. Or, there's just some sort of, okay, but now I'm just letting that go, and I'm letting you in, and whatever you have for me is enough. And I think that's, again, the kind of heart of worship is you come to a moment of worship, and you're not enjoying God. You're not enjoying life. That happens very often.
That's where you start.
And just because you start there, it doesn't mean that you're fake or you're not genuine when you start to declare the goodness of God. And maybe in the moment, you're like, I don't see the goodness of God, but then look back. And then if you can't even look back and say you've never seen the goodness of God, well, then you can look at what the scriptures affirm about God, or you can listen to what other people have affirmed about God. And you could say, okay, God, that's basically the book of Job is saying, God, I used to know you as the super faithful, good, kind God, but now I'm experiencing you as, not there and painful and almost this cruel person. But I will continue to, whether you give or you take away, I will bless the name of the Lord. I will bless what I know. I will bless what I've heard, because just because my circumstance changes doesn't mean you've changed. And so he was able to hold to that integrity, while his friends were just saying, look, you've got it wrong. You have done something wrong. That's why God is punishing you. And he's like, no, I didn't do something. I'm not any different than I was. If God was blessing me because I was good, then I would still be getting blessed because I haven't changed. If God was blessing me even though I was bad, I haven't changed. God changed on me. Something and it was true. And he held that integrity until the end when God came and visited him. And basically was like, Job, it's true that I'm good, but you have no idea how much bigger and gooder like I am than you could ever stand. But because you because you continued to try and relax into my goodness, because you continued to say, whether you give or take away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, I'm going to just keep hanging on until I get to enjoy you again. We used to enjoy each other so much. I haven't enjoyed you, however long the book of Job went on. But I'm going to hang on until I can enjoy you again. That's where he even says, though you slay me, yet I will trust you. Like, I don't want anything else. I want to get back to enjoying you. And that was his kind of call of worship. And God was so moved by that. He was like, Job, I'm going to destroy your friends unless you pray for them. And Job's like, all right, I'm praying for him. And God's like, friends, I'm only not destroying you because Job prayed for you. But there's just sometimes that's what worship is. It's just holding on until once again you can find yourself in a place where you're enjoying God and his goodness, however it may come.
And it's that audacity, I think, of worship again, because it's like you start to see yourself in the proper context and you're like, I think it's so easy to take for granted, again, that kind of torn veil reality of like, oh yeah, I get to be with Jesus and be in the presence of God anytime I want to. And it's easy for that to feel cheap for us, but it was so expensive. You know, that access was so expensive, and it's so audacious that we'd even have that. And so it's like when you show up in worship, I love the songs that just kind of pull you back, you know, like we just sang So Will I last weekend, and it's like this huge mile-high view of like, okay, this is what it is, you know, like I had no standing, but you did this, and now I get to stand with you, the King of the universe, the one that spoke creation into being. It's so audacious that I even get to talk to you. And you look at the Old Testament paradigm, it's like, it would kill us. Like that, there's no reason why we should have any interaction with God. But that audacity makes us, like, bubbles up in us, like, though the circumstances of our lives aren't great, we can look at it and go, there's still such goodness in God. And I think, you know, like, that cheapening the presence of God sometimes can be real for us. And I was telling you about, you know, John 12. We just did that huge series on John. And when Mary poured out that perfume on Jesus' feet, we've got Judas sitting there going, why did you do that? You could have sold that and given it to the poor. And really what Judas was doing was devaluing the presence of Jesus, saying he wasn't worth all of that, Mary. Like he's worth maybe some of that, but not all of that. And I think when we have that sort of perspective in worship, then whether he comes and he gives us all the good stuff or not, whether he's, you know, like, he's still good and it's still right.
I think that's interesting what you said about Judas and Mary in that moment, because that was Mary's worship. I think, you know, that was something she was compelled. That was her necklace. Obviously, it was worth a lot more than just the necklace I threw in the river. But that was her moment, compelled by what Christ had done for her, meant for her. She was enjoyed the goodness of God and just wanted to do whatever she could to respond to that. But probably in that moment, what happened was Judas experienced this conviction that he wanted to worship like that. I mean, obviously, I'm guessing here, but somehow something sparked in him enough to where he was frustrated to say that. But I actually think what could be interesting is that in that moment, what was happening is maybe the Spirit was trying to help Judas understand, Judas, I want you to worship me as well. And the worship that you do for me is going to be serving the poor. Giving money to the poor.
It's not diminishing Mary.
Which goes right at the idolatry that was in Judas's heart, where Judas was actually probably on the right track, saying, we should be taking riches and giving them to the poor. But not saying that's what Mary has to do, but that's what I'm supposed to do.
That's a conviction I'm giving you.
Inspired to do this, but instead of living into it, I'm now going to, you know, say she did it wrong. I don't know. That's kind of interesting, but I think
jealousy over worship was the reason of the very first murder in the Bible. It's like there's something in that it's like you go they're really pouring out an offering, and it's real true, and I know I'm holding back from the Lord. And I'm feeling like, it's building up that anger and that jealousy, you know.
That's very interesting. I think the idea you mentioned, worship is sacrifice. There's something else that I think is just so important if we're going to try and discover whether our worship is genuine or not. I do think that's a good way to aim, is like enjoying God in the reality of who He is. Again, apart from whatever circumstance you're in, and giving Him worth in that regard. But then I do think if we want to decide whether our worship is genuine, if the motivations and destinations were correct, I think then there has to be movement. I think it can't just be like, oh, that was great, we got caught up in the Lord's presence, and let's go and just, there's no change in our lives. I mean, there's that one song, I love it, where it says, how can I be here with you and not be moved by you? And I think to be in the presence of God, you just can't not respond. You know, like you just cannot change. And I do think, you know, the Bible oftentimes when God comes and talks about all the songs they're singing, all the festivals they're having, all of these religious things, He's like, I stopped my ears I don't even want to hear it anymore
Yeah.
because you've made it, that is the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he said, instead, let there be, a flood of justice,
yeah.
like righteous living, and then in Isaiah 58, my fast is when you feed the homeless or the hungry, and you invite the homeless poor into your home, and you make time for your family. I love that is the last phrase of that. It's like, what? But I think there is an aspect of worship that is, it's not worship and then this will happen. It's like worship includes this.
Yeah.
And that's where, Mary's act of worship, it was like she sang this song that moved the heart of Judas towards idolatry.
Yeah.
Instead of moving the heart of Judas towards actual service. But I just think that's such an important thing that worship, culminates in when we come and we enjoy the Lord, and then when His worth comes on us, and then we go into the world and actually, do justice, love mercy. I mean, that is worship. That is absolutely those sacrifices God takes as worship, as the fragrance that He longs for. And that song, I Just Want to Move Your Heart, that we've been singing lately. He asked the question, is it a fragrance? Then I'll pour my oil out. Is it a life laid down? Then here I make my vow. And is it a song I sing? And it's funny because I never want to rag on a song because then you ruin it. Because I think that song is great. And that's one of the songs I've been singing a bunch in this 21 days for my own soul. But it's just like, is it a fragrance? Then I'll pour my oil out. I mean, obviously, I think that did happen that one time with Mary, but it's rare that the Lord's going to be like, could you pour some,
have your jar of nard,
But I think there are just these sacrificial offerings that we can do that in some ways are meaningless in society. Like me throwing a necklace in the river. What does that do for anybody?
Yeah.
I think there's a place for that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, but then there's this real crux that I think needs to be loud and clear, and I think we might have forgotten in the American church or in the sonically, inclined church. Is it a life laid down? Then here I make my vow. I mean, I get what they're saying because it's got a rhyme and all those things, but is it a life laid down? Then I'm going to leave right now.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Then if that's what you're saying, I'm not going to stay here and be fragrant anymore. I'm not going to stay. I'm going to run, to find the person who's hurting, find the person who needs something. And I think that is just such an important part of worship. And then the last part is it a song I sing? Then here's every melody. And
well, there's that push and pull that's so needed. It's and I think we could get spiritually obese when we're just sitting around going, oh, I'm just singing about, and I get it. There's a lot of philosophy out there isn't God just worth singing about Him all day? Absolutely. But He also gave us a great commission. Jesus also gave us mission, gave us purpose that we need to be executing. And it's like the Sunday morning should just be that tip of the iceberg. We're all kind of like, you use the analogy all the time, like you're just running by in the marathon and grabbing your cup of water. We're just that's what makes worship powerful on a Sunday morning. We're all coming together. But if individually we're not laying our lives down throughout the week, those Sunday mornings become less and less powerful because it's not based on what's underneath the tip of the iceberg is this huge, life laid down for Jesus when nobody's watching you, and maybe the nard is the money or whatever it is, whatever offering it is that God's asking you to do throughout the week. It's the main meal is not on Sunday morning. That's just the snack, The rest of the week needs to be that life laid down.
I mean, I think, the pursuing of God's presence. I mean, that's this phrase. And I think there's something so good about that.
Yes.
That we want to pursue God's presence, that our first ministry is to the Lord. And that is so important. We never want to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
At the same time, Jesus said that His presence is most often going to be found in the least of these, right?
Yes.
So when those people got there, we prophesied in your name, we did all these things. But Jesus is like, depart from me, I never knew you.
Yeah.
And then He says, you didn't visit me when I was in prison. You didn't, come to visit me when I was sick. You didn't give me your clothes when I was naked. And all these things. And they're like, well, when were you all of those things?
Yeah.
And He's like, well, when I was the least of these. And then to those who maybe didn't get all the church stuff right, but they were actually there visiting the people in prison and the sick, and they were given the clothes and they were given the food, and they were like, when did we do that to you? And he was like, well, you did it when you did it to the least of these. And it's like, so basically Jesus is equating his presence is so often found in the least of these.
Yes.
And so that's, again, we're just like those two together, pursuing his presence, absolutely. And I think those times in the community of faith, his presence is found, and it's so meaningful. But we can never forget that Jesus made it very clear that if we want to find his presence, we're going to find it in the least of these.
Yeah.
And
and I think that's it was kind of the controversial thing when I was speaking on that thing with Jesus, when he said, if your offering's there and you realize you have a problem against your brother, leave that offering there and go work it out.
Yeah.
And there's something that it's like, okay, if the fruit of your worship means that you have no relationship with anybody, that you've forgotten all about people, like Jesus is going, you're really missing something. Yeah. You're missing an aspect of following my presence that's not just found in a church service or in the right offering on a Sunday morning, but it's found throughout the week in the least of these. And we just did a little podcast before this about missions. It's like, I don't know, there's so many times where I felt the presence of God so strong, and there's not been one instrument present. There's not been a pad going on in the background. Yeah. It was just Blake and I in Cambodia or something like that. This moment of I'm getting the heart of the Father toward his people, and it's turning my heart back to the Father.
Totally.
Yeah. So I know I'm not sure how we're doing at the time, but I think we could keep going. I have like 5 more things to talk about, but I'm like, I don't think
it's probably good for a chapter.
I think it's good for chapter 1. Yeah. But just as we close, could you pray over us? And
I'll just say when I was actually the executive director over worship at Living Streams for a season.
See everybody
in the absence of anyone who really knew what they were doing. No, and I got together with some guys. We went on this retreat, and we kind of came up with a vision statement for what worship could be. And so, I think it might be helpful in helping understand my perspective on worship.
Yeah.
But it was to create fully devoted worshipers of Jesus that put God's glory on display through song, sound, and Selah. And that idea of just, fully devoted worshipers of Jesus, just constantly kind of like checking our own motivations, checking our heart to make sure we're fully devoted in that way. But then ultimately the goal is to put God's glory on display. And it's funny because it's really not hard to do because God really is glorious, but it's just so hard to keep our own glory out of it, right? So we want to make sure we put God's glory on display and make sure we're not like trying to, catch in, get some of that glory on their own. But then through song, because I think it's totally valid and important, and lyrics, and I mean, they can be some of our best theology in churches if we can get lyrics right. Sound, and that includes all the Nick Orsos, it includes everybody else that's not necessarily singing a song or writing a song, but that's something that actually everybody in our church can participate in, in the sound.
The rhythm, the artistry, offering, the craft. We even talked about that, things, like working on those things is all right and good.
And then the Selah. And the Selah is something that I think is so important, and that word comes from Psalms. It's just pause, And I think the silence, I think even in music, the rest is such an important part of any kind of piece of music. And I think we need to incorporate that into our worship, our services, our times with the Lord. Is just, okay, sometimes it's just, let's just be still. Let's just like stand in reverence. I think the Catholic Church, all those years has a lot to teach us about just kind of reverence and awe in our worship, and not muddling up the moment with a G chord, or with another, even just kind of like a prophetic singing.
Just stop for a minute.
All those
just
things.
Pause.
Just let that be enough. And so I don't know. I just think that was helping to shape a little bit of what I was hoping to see happen here. And
Yeah.
it's been awesome. I mean, I love what's happening here. I love that you're in charge of it now and where we're going. I love what Jay has contributed. I love what, is possible with Nathan. I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful, and would love to see, how we can do this, not just for our own local expression, but even maybe some other people and other churches or whatever, whether it's songs or whether it's actually people that we're sending out or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Or serving, which our team does all the time, goes out and serves other churches, helps them with their sound or anything they've got going on. So, but thank you, David.
Yeah.
This has been
Pray.
awesome.
You said
Yeah,
pray.
go for it. Yeah.
Lord, I do thank you that you keep teaching us, whether we get it right or get it wrong, you keep teaching us.
Yeah.
And Lord, we are so thankful for all of the songs that we have. I mean, so often each of us can think different seasons of our life, how there was a song that carried us through. And I pray that you would just continue to raise up songwriters that can teach through the lyric, that can inspire through the lyric, that can have precision, so that people aren't thrown off or led astray. But they can really just put your word to music, put your truth to music, so that it can just be something that rings in our ears and rattles in our souls and sustains us through whatever we go through. And Lord, I pray that we at Living Streams, whoever else might be listening to this, but I pray that we would be true worshipers.
Yes, Lord.
We would be worshipers who worship in spirit and in truth. That we would honor you and in everything we do. And Lord, that the full expression of worship would be alive and well here, not just only musicians, but all across the board, Lord. People would just find ways to make offerings of worship that are part of our church family, and you would just be so honored that your glory really would be on display in this place and everything we do, in the way that we treat each other, and the way that we interact with the world around us, as well as in our times of corporate gatherings, Lord. But I thank you for all those who are standing in the gap there and leading us in worship too, Lord. I pray you would just give them an ability to understand their own hearts and to see whenever there's a bit of idolatry or selfishness that's sneaking in at all, and they would be able to just lay that back down before you. And there'd be no jealousy in our worship, Lord.
No.
But strengthen Ryan too as he goes about the task of overseeing all of that. And we thank you for this time.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you guys so much for taking time. I think we're probably going to have to do a part B of this because I'm like, there's more I want to talk about. So just stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and have a great day.